Thank you very much. As I was saying, next item in the agenda is the joint debate concerning the EU defence readiness, the report by Mr. Austrevicius and Mr. Zile, military mobility, and the report by Mr. Gomar, European defence readiness 2030 assessment of needs. Before giving the floor to our next speaker, I beg you to keep silent to respect our colleague. Thank you very much for being so kind, Monsieur Romac.
Monsieur le Président, chers
President, colleagues, European defence will not be possible without private capital. For the first time since the end of the Cold War, the EU is massively investing in its defence. The investments of member states have increased 42% in 2024 to reach a record 116 billion euros and should near 130 billion in 2025. The end of 2025. And these figures, although they're impressive, they're dramatically inadequate given the estimated needs of 160 billion a year, according to Rearm Europe. A number of European think tanks are even talking about 250 billion euros need per year. No public budget can absorb such financial investment without imbalancing its own budget or neglecting other essential priorities, cohesion, health, climate change. The only reasonable proposal is a change of paradigm, make sort of capital, private capital, driving force in the funding of European defence. In the general context of European defence, our point of departure was that we have a threefold challenge to take up when it comes to defence companies and investors. Firstly, to have far more orders and a greater visibility. Secondly, increase the production rhythms. And thirdly, to enable companies to have access to the necessary finance to upscale their activities. Our European Defence Readiness 2030, our report, is a response to that third challenge, releasing private equity via public procurement initiatives. But the report has been produced on the basis of a finding of the SEDE committee, the difficulty when it comes to defence companies to have sort of access to equity or debt funding. Some sort of 40% of the defence industries are most affected by this phenomenon. It's a situation that has certain peculiarities specific to the defence sector. Defence, of course, is an exclusive prerogative of member states in accordance with our founding treaties. Secondly, there's a high dependence on public procurement, and thirdly, with long subcontractor chains, and there's also over restrictive interpretation of investment criteria, where defence is very often an exemption, tobacco, money, gambling. The ownership report, the aim of it is to facilitate access to private investment. There are 14 specific proposals that figure in the report. Perhaps you'll allow me to mention just 4. A formal extension of the mandate of the EIB with the establishment of a dedicated branch or sector dedicated to defence and sovereignty, a better accompaniment of defence payments when it comes to the EU via chambers of commerce in order to have access to European funding. Thirdly, an appeal to the EIB to increase its defence equality security by 175 million to 1 billion in order to support innovative defence companies in investing in specialised funds. The Defence Equality Facility will reassure private investors and encourage them to bring more capital to the table. And it will also make it possible to fund SMEs and prevent them being bought up by foreign powers. We should get the Commission to support the European label so that we can give priority to long-term investment, the idea being to envisage a defence and sovereignty label. In listening to Econ and Budge and the negotiation between Commission and CD, we have arrived at a very satisfactory compromise, it seems to me, that remains faithful to the initial proposal and is largely the text adopted on the 27th of November by SEDE committee, and I'm convinced it will contribute to strengthening European defence credibility. We won't be a credible defence force if we have to rely only on national budgets and subsidies, but we'll be credible if we enable our strategic defence industry to have access to private investment, private capital. So I invite you to vote in favour of the report when it comes up for the vote tomorrow. Thank you.
As well as our reporter, Vice President Zille.
Priekšsēdētāja kungs, komisāra kungs, cienījamie kolēģi, kad mēs kopā ar manu kolēģi.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Commissioner. Our colleague, Mr. Ostrovicius, started work on this own initiative report. This is an important report. I worked for many years in the Transport Committee, and in that time we worked a lot on the TEN-T corridors. There are many similarities between those projects and NATO projects. Together with the European Council, we quickly recognised that the money available was insufficient. And even all the money allocated to the Connect Europe facility would be insufficient. I remember that clearly. And for the 21-27 MFF, the European Council looked at the Commission and Parliament proposal, which was for €6 billion, and they reduced that by a factor of 4. I hope this won't happen again in the new MFF. At the same time, I wasn't aware back then just how insurmountable the bureaucratic barriers would be in this field. So, for example, to transfer a military convoy from France to Romania, it takes a whole month. And for other itineraries, it's almost as much as 45 days. And in some countries, federal countries, there are special requirements for transfer of military material across domestic borders, across the federal states. And all of this hampers military mobility. Similarly, efforts to digitalise our customs procedures. This is the famous Form 302. The procedure is now based on a PDF form. And this goes to show how insufficient our efforts are.
I think yes, but at the same time there are many buts. European Commission, thanks to Commissioner Tzitzikostas and also Kobilis, to your initiative to receive in the College of the Commission pretty fast decision and with legislative proposals. This is a good news, of course. Good news also is that new MFF increased CEF funding significantly, and MFF envelope military mobility reached 17 billion euros. But we have that for the 500 hotspots, we need 100 billion euros. It's the estimation of Transport Commissioner. We have had a geopolitical shift in financing defense and security. We create a military industry with with not enough, but with a significant increase of finances. But at the same time, we discovered that there are not dual-engine driven locomotives in the European market. We don't know that also diesel engine market, the diesel engine locomotives. We know that the flatbeds are not yet here for heavy movements, heavy military technique. But at the same time, I would like also to use BAT for a positive note. Thanks for all colleagues, shadow rapporteurs for fast-track compromise-oriented work. Thanks for the rapid legislative proposal, as I said, from the Commission side, and also to use a fast-track approach for year 2026 to finalise this the legislative proposal with the aim to start a new removed bureaucracy in military mobility starting from 2027. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vice President, and as well as our reporter, Mr. Austrevicius.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, honourable colleagues, ensuring a safe and stable future for Europe and its citizens requires concrete solutions. We must do everything possible today, rather than leaving it until tomorrow. The geostrategic situation determines where, when, and to what extent military capabilities must be deployed. Military mobility is not just about moving our troops and assets. It is essential for deterring, suppressing and containing hostile military actions that arise in various parts of the European Union and for maintaining and restoring the security balance. It is no coincidence that the god of war, Mars, is always depicted in a military chariot ready for action. The concept of a military Schengen, as highlighted in our military mobility report, must be realised to allow European military forces to move freely across national borders, ensuring speed and guaranteeing digital document verification and compliance with uniform transport standards. Europeans trust the Schengen rules, and our military must have the same guarantee. No infrastructure obstacles should prevent the transportation of military equipment and supplies along Europe's 4 priority military mobility corridors. The quality and capacity of this infrastructure is essential for Europe to be able to withstand any arising threats. Increasing our transport capacity in the air, on water and on land requires special attention. The dual nature of these capabilities, which are used for both civil and military purposes, depends on collaboration between the private and public sectors, attracting necessary investments and adopting the latest technical solutions. Let's not forget that strengthening the foundations of military mobility also improves the quality of civil infrastructure, which is essential for supporting our economies. Therefore, we must learn the lessons of the current EU's multi-annual budget, secure the necessary additional funding and ensure the full implementation of investment projects. Railways and seaports play a special role in military mobility, providing the opportunity for a large-scale coordinated deployment of troops, ammunition and other supplies. Therefore, the maintenance and upgrading of railways and seaport infrastructure must be a priority. We must ensure full connectivity within the Union, which also benefits the movement of goods and passengers while reducing our climate impact. The necessary funds for upgrading dual-use infrastructure and ensuring military mobility, estimated at hundreds of billions of euros, must be mobilised as quickly as possible. This should be done not only through the MFF, but also by seeking favourable loans. Growing military threats are currently concentrated on EU eastern borders. The defence spending on member states bordering Russia or Belarus already well exceeds the EU average. EU support and attention must be focused on where the greatest threats to Europe's security are. Dear colleagues, to conclude, I would shadow rapporteurs for their excellent cooperation, and indeed my colleagues in the Transport Committee, especially co-rapporteur Robert Zile, and the author of the Military Mobility Report for the expertise and teamwork in preparing this report. I believe this report is a step forward for more secure Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Commissioner Tzitzikostas. Commissioner Tzitzikostas, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. Honourable members of the European Parliament, indeed the Commission welcomes the own initiative reports prepared by this House, which indeed drive forward Europe's defence agenda. Confirms the urgency of delivering on our shared objective, achieving defence readiness by 2030. And I want to reassure you that the Commission is in full implementation mode. And also, allow me to clarify that in this package that we proposed, Member States remain in the driving seat. They are in command of their armed forces. They take the ultimate decision on doctrine, capabilities, composition, etc. The Commission is committed to using all of its instruments to support Member States in this great endeavour. We have guiding documents setting the course, the White Paper, and of course the Defence Readiness Roadmap, and more recently the Defence Industry Transformation Roadmap, which is very important because it puts forward concrete solutions to maintain our technological edge by integrating the innovative power that we have in Europe with our smaller and medium-sized enterprises. And we are getting rid of the unnecessary burdens on industry and Member States with this defence readiness omnibus. So we welcome the position at committee level reached yesterday on this file, and I want to thank you very much for the very good engagement that we had with the Transport Committee, but also with the Defence Committee last week, along with my colleague Andrius Kubilius. Now we have the financial firepower, thanks to the Rearm Euro plan, the 150 billion euros SAFE instrument is our most visible instrument here. Together with EDIP, we can now incentivise common procurement and targeted support for our defence industries. And finally, we put forward an ambitious proposal for a defence budget under the next MFF to maintain the ambition in the midterm. So your report, Mr. Gomar, touches on all of these very important and crucial, critical points. European defence readiness is a common goal and a common interest. And I'm pleased to see, overall, that we are aligned on how to move towards European defence readiness. Honourable members, I can assure you that from the Commission side, we will accelerate work on all the work strands as I mentioned. 2026 will be the year of delivery, starting with the military mobility package, which is vital for the EU's collective security, and indeed, you cannot defend a continent if you cannot easily move across it, easily and quickly. Your report, Mr. Zile, Mr. Estravicius, provides important recommendations with a view to ensuring that our rules and transport infrastructure are fit for the fast transport of military troops and equipment across our Union. Our military mobility package that we presented on the 19th of November has three basic pillars: removing regulatory barriers, resilience of our infrastructure, and enhancement of assets. On the regulatory front, our goal is very, very simple. When we need to move military forces and equipment, those movements should follow uniform rules across all 27 member states. Our goal here is to establish an EU-wide military mobility area by the end of 2027, which is a first step to what we call a military Schengen. The level of facilitation must reflect the context, of course. What is acceptable in peacetime is not enough in crisis. For example, today, cross-border movement permissions can take up to 45 days. This is unacceptable. So we facilitate and we speed up. In peacetime, we propose a single permission procedure for cross-border military movements with a maximum of 3 working days. So from 45 to 3. While in an emergency situation, military movements need to be announced at least 6 hours in advance. Now, turning to the second pillar, infrastructure, we need to upgrade our civilian infrastructure, our trans-European transport network, so that it is fit for purpose. In concrete terms, this means having bridges, tunnels, railways, roads ready to carry oversized vehicles. And ports need to be able to welcome deeper vessels, and airports to service heavier and longer planes. So Member States will be required to upgrade the military mobility corridors as a matter of priority in the next few years, so that they meet the needs of modern defence. Our infrastructure needs to be resilient against any possible threat, cyber, hybrid or physical threat. We have proposed 17 billion euros in the next MFF from the Connecting Europe facility to support our top priority projects on these 4 European military mobility corridors, the so-called hotspots. And I'm very thankful for this House for your support. And it's not the only instrument. CEF is one instrument, but Member States can use cohesion funds, can use the competitive fund, and of course their national plans as well. Now, in terms of capabilities, it is essential that Member States have access to the necessary transport and logistic equipment and services to facilitate military transport operation. To enhance this access, the military mobility package will establish a solidarity pool enabling Member States to share dual-use transport and logistics equipment. We will also implement measures to ensure seamless cooperation between our armed forces and the civilian sector. When Member States are moving forces in Europe, they need to know who to contact and who will organise this convoy. To this end, each Member State will appoint a national coordinator for military support. And also a military mobility transport group will bring together Member States, the Commission, the EAS and the EDA to ensure the whole of government approach at a Union level. In addition, our TEN-T committee will have an enhanced role in implementing this regulation on infrastructure matters. Honourable Members, speed is of essence, and we have to explain to our citizens that this money for military mobility is for dual use, civilian and military. So this investment is not only as an investment on our security, but it is also an investment on our economy, on our single market, on our competitiveness. The rapid movement of large numbers of troops and volumes of equipment is, of course, crucial to our deterrence and our readiness. Hence, we have proposed to create an emergency framework, the EMERS, as we call it, European Military Mobility Enhanced Response System, that introduces fast-track procedures for military transport in the EU in case that there is a crisis. Now, the military mobility proposal is, of course, with you. With the Council and the Commission is looking forward to working closely with this House to ensure that Europe stands better and prepared. So thank you, honourable members, for your support throughout this package and for living up to this great challenge for Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner. On behalf of the Committee on Budget, Madame Jach.
Pán komisár. Mr. Commissioner, colleagues, the Russian threat is real. Everyone can see it, everyone can feel it, and Putin himself confirms it with his statement. It's a disgrace seeing governments such as those of Slovakia and Hungary losing their compass and pulling us towards Putin. However, this will not prevent us from helping to increase Europe's defence capabilities. The report I have worked on closely is just about this, is about what the EU must do immediately and in practical terms, i.e. secure further funding so that we can urgently increase production capacity to attract private capital and involve small and medium-sized enterprises, and to also help Ukraine, among other things, by releasing frozen Russian assets. It is in our interest to be on the right side in these historic moments, not to be on the side of the Kremlin and Putin, to make it clear to everyone, but on the side of our own European security. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Committee on Econ, Mr. Bosselager.
Colleagues, Commissioner, all we want for Christmas is for Europe to be able to defend itself. I'm happy we are making some baby steps towards a common and multi-annual procurement, and I'm happy that we are improving military mobility. But we are working with the assumption that the world is the world of yesterday. And I think the US security strategy, as well as the negotiations for peace in Ukraine, have shown that we lack hard power. We lack the real hard power, and the responses on the table are not enough. We are currently too weak. We are too weak because we have 27 national defense ministries trying to procure. We are too weak because we have 17 different tank systems for the Leopard class. We are too weak because we don't dare to speak with one voice for foreign policy for this union. So as long as we don't fix these issues, we will not be able to have a real voice that will be heard. And therefore, I really ask you to go the next step. Let's make sure that we unite. Let's make sure that we get towards the United States of Europe so that Europe is able to defend itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Now we jump into the second part on behalf of the EPP group, Mr. Chomsky.
Thank you very much, President, dear Commissioner, dear colleagues. Military mobility is today crucial for our security and safety as Europe. Rapid reaction time, rapid response, that's the key. If we are not able to move the troops and the equipment quickly, we are not to be ready. We need military Schengen here and now. The troops cannot be stuck on the borders. The Commissioner said that it takes 45 days to get a permit. We also need to invest in dual-use infrastructure, roads, airports, maritime ports, digital networks. This is not a luxury. This is a basic necessity if we want to be resilient to cyber attacks, to sabotage attempts in Poland, Romania and near the UK. The threat is real. It is here and now. We also see very well with our own eyes what is happening in the US, behind the ocean, over the ocean. We need to be self-sufficient. We need to act quickly. And we are acting quickly. We have SAFE on the one hand. We also have military mobility, 10 times as much money as previously under the previous MFF. Let me quote General Eisenhower. It wouldn't be difficult to prove that battles and wars are won or lost depending on the logistics. Logistics is key. The security and safety of Europe, that is the key. Thank you.
On behalf of the Socialist Group, la señora Mendes.
Thank you very much, President. Dear friends, I think that we are into the next budget. We have been spending on defence in Europe for 30 years, and there are an increasing number of geopolitical threats of all kinds. Obviously, Ukraine is the best example of this, and that's why it's important that we invest more in defence, and we invest in the modernisation of our defence system. But in order for that to be a reality, and thanks to this package, It's necessary for there to be coordination between our investments, cooperation between member states, between the public and private sectors, and serious investments in innovation. We need investments in innovation because this helps to create qualified work that's well paid. That's important. And this is why the Defence Omnibus is a good example of how we should work to simplify procedures and to ensure that money gets to member states and so that they can then invest in our defence. Lastly, dear friends, I'd like to say that this cannot go counter to social cohesion. It has to be well managed. There has to be highly qualified work, as I was saying. If we do this, we're going to have strong economies, and these strong economies will guarantee that citizens will be better defended. Thank you.
On behalf of the PFE Group, Monsieur Tioni.
Du point de vue de sa défense.
From the point of view of its defence, I think the drama is that for many years we thought it wasn't really necessary to massively invest in our defence, but those are that time's long gone in word and deed. I think the need to have well-equipped armed forces is a consensus. The Russians did Dnieper catalyse things, but we need to catch up on lost time as we talk. The war is still taking place. Peace will come, but we should not discard the hypothesis whereby Europeans decide they don't need to invest so much in their army. It's not a question of butter or guns. I think we need to come back on a certain number of exceptions or derogations that are no longer justified. Who's to say that tomorrow ecologists or socialists won't be struggling in order to reintroduce binding rules which discourage public and private investment in arms? So I think we're going to sort of fall back or relapse into a sort of cyclical negative cycle when it comes to defence. I think deterrence requires a long-term effort. 30 years of negligence mean that we now have to respond urgently. So once this urgency is over, we shouldn't then relapse into sort of negligence or insouciance. I think the report by Mr. Goulmar is a step in the right direction. As he suggests, we need to create a sustainable financial environment that will promote investment in defence. And above and beyond that, we have to enable citizens to support rearmament. Our party in France is suggesting the establishment of a fund guaranteed backed by the state to enable people to earmark some of their savings for such a fund. I think defence has to become an obligation incumbent on all, rather than a matter for specialists, professionals and industrialists. That is a condition if European nations are to enter into the new world where sort of obsolete nations are either crushed or pushed aside.
On behalf of the ECR Group, Monsieur Gambino.
President, ladies and gentlemen. Strengthening the resilience of our infrastructure and our European defence industry while improving interoperability of armed forces are, of course, interlinked objectives. Within this framework, the dual-use technology and infrastructure means that our investments are more effective and improves our response and readiness for crisis. Military mobility is more than just a technical question. It's the very basis of the future of European defence. This requires coordination between the European member states, the European Union and NATO. The eastern and southern flanks of Europe are interdependent, but they are closely linked. It's important to have multimodal transport corridors and permit systems. The military mobility package goes in this direction. It also improves civilian mobility with economic spin-offs. It's also an opportunity, an enormous opportunity, which the whole continent should most certainly make the most of. Thank you.
On behalf of Renew, Madame Devaux.
Monsieur le Président,
President, Commissioners, colleagues. Just a few days ago, Vladimir Putin said he was ready for war with Europe. We as Europeans do not want war, but we must prepare for it. Being ready means being able to transport troops and materials to a front. It means having bridges and roads that can bear the weight of armoured vehicles and not to have administrative procedures holding things up, which have no place in a time of crisis. Lastly, it means a clear choice to use European funds to buy European material. All of these priorities feature in the European Parliament's report on military mobility, opening the path to future legislative action. It also has a message of support, a clear message for the Commission's proposal to invest 17 billion euros in strengthening mobility infrastructure in Europe for the military. Colleagues, the moment has come for Europeans to take responsibility and to back up their credibility in an increasingly threatening world. Mobility is one of the stones that will bring to this edifice. Thank you.
On behalf of the Greens, Mr. Stakis.
Godātie kolēģi, es gribētu citēt vienu no NATO ģenerāļiem, ar kuru nesen man bija saruna. Viņš teica, pašlaik lielākā kauja mums ir pati nokļūšana līdz kaujai. Un, lai mūsu
I think this is one of the biggest battles that we will need to wage in the future. And I think we have to look beyond borders, but in order to adapt, it'll take weeks and months. And in some areas, these issues have already been resolved. We have a sort of a smaller scale military mobility, a smaller Schengen area, as it were. And we have also introduced training of armed forces, with the brigades being moved to neighbouring countries. And I think it's time now to transpose the system elsewhere with the EU so that red tape doesn't stand in the way of our security, so that it doesn't paralyse any action as a result of any bureaucracy. I think in crisis situations, we've got to be able to help one another straight away, and which is why I appeal to you to support the report. We have come forward with a certain number of proposals, and I think we need to think in terms of the Suwałki corridor, which is important for the Baltic states. I think military mobility has to be a priority, and it's a question of what funding can be earmarked for military mobility. I think we have to be able to adapt and tap into already existing solutions.
Arvoisa puhemies.
President, Commission, colleagues, Europe's security environment has changed permanently. Therefore, we have to strengthen our defence readiness, and it includes military mobility, Rearm Europe plan, and so on. Through Rearm Europe, Europe bears more responsibility on its own defence. It is not only about increasing defence spending, but also establishing joint European capabilities, joint procurement, and strengthening the basis for defence industries. With this collaboration, we can avoid overlaps, improve interoperability, and make sure that Europe can deliver the capabilities we need securely and effectively. Also, we need more military mobility. Defence is not credible if military mobility does not function properly. Military mobility improves interoperability between different traffic systems, and also interoperability between military and civil system. This improves our defence capabilities and also resilience in the entire Europe. Together, Rearm Europe and military mobility will increase our credibility as a credible operator in defence. These do not replace national defence but complement it. We need more investments and also unwavering support to Ukraine. Together we have to work for security and stability in this changing world. I also like to wish Merry Christmas to everyone. Thank you for your good collaboration.
On behalf of the ESN group, Mr. Bistron.
No, it's going on. Okay. Dear colleagues, I would like to quote the new national strategy of the United States of America. Eine große europäische Mehrheit.
A large majority of Europeans is in favour of peace. But this wish is not being put into practice by leaders because they ignore the prerogatives of democracy. That sentence applies to anybody who's in favour of rearmament. Why on earth are you in favour of such massive rearmament? For 30 years, Europe has had no adversary. Since the collapse of the Warsaw Pact, there has no longer been a threat for Europe. Thanks to NATO's enlargement, you have successfully transformed Russia into a new enemy for Europe. And as a result, you now want the war to continue. You want to continue funding war so as to enable you to continue to have an enemy. So, madam, you're speaking on behalf of the lobbies you represent in the military industry, madam? Are you here as a member or as a lobbyist for the defence industry? I'm quoting the official document from the US government. Obviously, I struck home with that, didn't I, madam? So, the President interrupts.
We jump now into the second part of the debate. Your time is over, sorry. We cannot. I cannot understand you. I cannot understand you. We cannot hear you without micro. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear colleague. We jump now into the second part, the third part of the debate. My first speaker is Mr. Beck.
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, infantry wins battles. A former general who served in many wars said this. Military mobility is classified as one of the 9 priorities of the McGuinness Roadmap for 2030. It's essential when it comes to defence of the continent. This report should also provide the leitmotif for the rolling out of improvements to military mobility in Europe. Both hardware and software must be improved. Investment in suitable infrastructure, a sort of military Schengen. At the very heart of this programme, we have more than ever coordination and cooperation between member states. Colleagues, the train is now on the tracks, but the station isn't in sight. A great deal remains to be made. Talks when it comes to the implementation of the military mobility package and essential regulation. I do hope that we can count on your support for this report, which is an important next step on this road.
Dear colleague, my next speaker is... sorry? Okay. Mr. Caffon. Monsieur Caffon.
Monsieur le Président.
President, Commissioner, colleagues. People often say that if you want peace, prepare for war. And here, in practice, it's the opposite. By investing 17 billion euros in wartime logistics, we will also be very much improving day-to-day mobility for all European citizens. 99.9% of the time we're at peace. So sometimes we have bridges and tunnels which need maintenance. We need to repair them. sometimes we could have a shorter journey time for passengers and more capacity for rail freight. For our armed forces, what this should mean is more large aircraft, more healthcare wagons, more helicopters. And that will also be something that could be useful if we have flooding or pandemics or major forest fires, things that could help to get our firefighters, our doctors and our medicines to where they need to be. But we're still just at the bottom of the hill and we need to open our eyes. Not a day goes by without our control towers or lookouts or signalling systems being subject to attack. In 2024, France picked up on over 4,000 cyber attacks, with transport being at the top of the list of sectors targeted. So in the future, for European legislation, I will be hoping to see that our signalling, our trains and our aircraft will be made in Europe. And I want to ensure that we make progress. We cannot just leave these things in the hands of a foreign power. So we need to ensure that the control of signalling is in our hands. And we also need to ensure that with a simple decree, member states can take back control of their ports, as with Antwerp or other ports which have been abandoned. We need to take back control of our infrastructure. Thank you.
My next speaker is Mr. Holveni.
Biztos úr, tisztelt képviselőtársaim!
Commissioner, colleagues, we ought not allow for a war logic to really guide and determine the future of this continent. Of course, it's extremely important for our strategic goals to be reached, but this particular report that we're in the course of dealing with right now, it goes against the interests of the people of the European Union, because money, simply giving out money to the Ukrainian war machine is not the way to go. For all of that to come out of the EU budget without any sort of guarantee whatsoever. And furthermore, we see that the leading politicians in Europe are generating this war narrative. This goes against logic and reason. European citizens are angry and disappointed that leading politicians here in Europe are moving in that particular direction and have that orientation. We ought not create this precedent. A precedent would lead to the entire financial system of Europe being undermined by this type of funding. The politicians that are on the side of war, they want that our policy ought to lead us towards war preparedness, but this is unacceptable. We don't need any escalation. We need peace on the continent, and we have to focus on our own defense industry, that it ought to deal with protecting the continent, but we ought not to make this particular war logic undermine the future of our continent. Thank you.
Chair, Commissioner, Europe has no more time to wait preparing for war, which Russia wants, to which it drives at, and which sooner or later it will try to start. We have to rebuild our defense potential in all areas during the peace. Airports, roads, it's just infrastructure. But when we are in face of a conflict, it may become a key element of our security system. We need the regulation and investments which will improve the transportation of army, its equipment, and accepting allies' help. One of the projects is Via Pomerania, which should connect Polish Pomerania with Bydgoszcz and Breslau, who are an important place for Polish and European security. And financing such important projects for military purposes should be financed by the European Commission. It should find its money. Thank you.
My next speaker is Madame Strack-Zimmermann.
President, Commissioner, in this Parliament we have inherited what our grandparents built, and we need to ensure that we are responsible too for this peace in the future. And Certainly since 2014, we've seen that with the annexation of Crimea and the first attack on the east of Ukraine, and then with the battles that we have seen since 2022, Russia is behaving rather differently and is trying to play us off against each other. And here we have members of the European Parliament who are singing that same song. So, colleagues, it is important that we strengthen our industry, that businesses can ensure that we can live in safety, because without material equipment, then we won't make it. And this is about deterrence, and that's very important. It's important that we work together when it comes to issues of military mobility. This is the only way that we can protect ourselves. This is the only way that in the future we will be able to live in peace and freedom. Thank you.
My next speaker is Mr. Van Lanschot.
Finally, some concrete steps on defence readiness. This report has good proposals on how to organise and finance European defence. And Volt is happy to have included 3 calls to action. First, strategic capabilities like satellites and missile defence must be provided by the EU. Second, use the same equipment and make buying it together not the exception but the rule. And 3, while we invest in our defence, keep our investments in a climate-neutral economy and in the well-being of Europeans going. These are good steps, but it's not enough. Some extra money and some extra equipment will not protect us from Russia. And the US national security strategy shows for the 100th time America is unreliable at best, and at worst it behaves like an enemy that wants to divide us and demolish the EU. Colleagues, we're on our own. So we require a fundamental change in the way we organize our defense. Most Europeans want a European army. What does that look like? A European military headquarters with a European commander. A supranational force of 250,000 volunteer soldiers on top of national armies trained together. And led democratically by an elected European government. So, what brings real protection? A United States of Europe with a European army that can defend it. Most Europeans want it, and Volt is here to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleague. Madame de Mirel.
Dankeschön, Herr Präsident.
Thank you very much. Imagine a situation where trains run on time and traffic jams are ancient history. Everything works properly, and the EU has contributed to that. That is a lovely dream, but it's not a dream. It is but a dream, because the Commission does nothing when it comes to looking after the weakest in society. But when we're talking about military, then everything happens. We talk about military Schengen. We talk about mobility. To make sure that we get heavy equipment and troops through as quickly as possible. We don't need to analyze dangers and so on. 10 million being invested to make sure that more tanks can get over our bridges. Well, we've been told for ages that there's no money for civil society. Everything was just allowed to go to rack and ruin. But all of a sudden, everything is possible. That this is history where we're preparing war instead of looking after peace. Military tactics go ahead of everything else. And now we're talking about, okay, that means we're going to invest some money in railways. No, it's being invested in war. Well, the people who are suffering are the young people, the 55,000 people, young people who went on school strike and said, we don't want to be cannon fodder, we want peace.
Speaker, Mr. Rossi. You have the floor.
President, colleagues, first Napoleon, then Hitler, and now the EU is planning war, third time in history, a war against Russia, portrayed as Readiness 2030. It's supposed to be a defence plan. And it's going to be a historic mistake and it won't be much left of Europe. I think that must be clear to everyone. So what is driving this? It's not the love of humanity, because Ukraine is a corrupt state, certainly corrupt. And there are billions of euros that have gone to Ukraine without any checks and controls. It could have been invested in the EU. And here we have EU politicians who are filling their pockets with kickbacks. It might be just a primitive hatred of Russia. Perhaps you've not learnt anything from history. But the fact is that this EU isn't ready for anything. And we ought to be disarming ourselves verbally. We should be grateful to Trump for his peace initiative. Trump is showing us what we need: diplomacy, common sense, and above all, a great power strategy. If you look at what happened yesterday in Berlin, it's just a miserable show. Thank you.
Vielen Dank. Mr. Papadakis, you have the floor.
102 billion, 100 for infrastructure, then from the MFF, many billions, bridges, tunnels, artillery vehicles, all of this in order to transfer arms within 72 hours from one place to the other in Europe. On the other hand, we have Greek airports, civilian airports, without the necessary equipment. We have a road infrastructure that isn't sufficient in Greece as well. This is the rule of law, the war rule of law in Greece and in the European Union, above all preparing for war and sacrificing civilians and sacrificing essentially the entire infrastructure for civilians. There's nothing in place, no system, no surveillance system to protect individuals from natural disasters. But what we have here right now are unions which are calling for fighting against this new particular approach, fighting against this support for Israel, fighting against this military support, endless in nature for Ukraine. So there is, what we want to call for is no more sacrifices for this war machinery.
Thank you very much, Chairman. As the Commissioner has pointed out, throughout the year 2025, we have been able to set up the legal framework for the Europe of defence. The White Book on Defence. We have later on the European Defence Readiness Roadmap, the European Defence Readiness Omnibus, the European Industrial Transformation Framework, but now, in the year 2027, we have to deliver. We are going to be judged and to be assessed by how able and capable we are to deliver. And the first step we have to look into is military mobility. On the military and the civilian sector as well. We have the funding already earmarked for that. We have also the political will. Now we have to deliver and to be able to come to fruition in the next 26, 27 years. The financial package is already there. The SAFE package has shown us how much demand is there. We are now preparing the second SAFE package before the first has been already delivered. That means there is political will, demand, then there is no excuse not to deliver. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor Pascual de la Parte.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pascual de la Parte. Mr. Duroux.
Monsieur le Commissaire, Commissioner, myself and my party, we want peace. We want peace above all. But we do have to have a European dissuasion force, otherwise we're not credible. When it comes to military mobility, there's something which is very important, and that is that it is civilian and military mobility. In other words, our citizens will benefit from it, be it whether we're talking about roads or bridges or railways. Can I draw your attention to three things? One has already been mentioned. This is sensitive infrastructure, sensitive to cyber attack and sabotage. That's one thing. And secondly, don't underestimate the administrative difficulties It's very difficult. I know that you've got goodwill in politics. It takes 5 years or 7 years to get work done. You've got the tendering procedure, you've got an appeals procedure, all that's got to be covered by regulation, and then you've got the execution of the actual projects. And let's think about the transport workers as well, because if we didn't have them, we'd have no transport.
Monsieur Olivier.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. Under the pretext of military mobility, almost presented as an administrative problem, you are pushing a different agenda, and that is a European army, something that you're talking almost openly about. A single permit for mobility would be a means for the Commission to decide on military mobility across Europe, and therefore to oblige countries to accept, even against their will, a movement of troops. The second agenda is a war agenda, which you are preparing with great detail and disconcerting irresponsibility. You've already suggested 3 levels of mobilization: peacetime, crisis time, and wartime. Well, we can see where you're leading us to. And we already see that the Ile-de-France is in your corridors: Ukraine, Moldova, the Balkans. What about the cost of all of this militarist madness? 17 billion first off, 100 billion in the long term. So a rite of passage across our territory, above all in military terms. We don't understand that delegation of powers. We believe in national armies, which allow countries to make a sovereign choice whether or not they wish to participate in conflict. The children of France will not go to die in wars which are not our wars. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur, Madame Donatsan.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President. The geopolitical context is clear. And, of course, the strategic studies which are being conducted indicate what the problems are, but we need further detail on this. But the Commission has already accelerated this particular discussion with numerous different elements. The reinforcement of the report on the focusing rather on the industrial basis, the policy of defense, which we have in Europe, creating it, redefining it, and also the role of third countries is extremely important as well. We need more financing in order to be able to meet all of the demands. And then there's the issue of governance. Greater coordination between the member states is part of the report. And here, the infrastructure it's clear that it's not at the level that it ought to be right now for a concerted effort. And then I think that the European mentality ought to change as well. We find ourselves in some sort of pacifism, but I think indeed we have to prepare ourselves. We have to understand that there are external threats. Europe has to work together and deal with these particular risks and the numerous nuances of these risks as well. In Italy, we see one approach. In Lithuania, we see another approach as far as, in other words, military service. We have to make it clear how we are going to work together concertedly and have a single system in place, including for drafts. Thank you.
Monsieur le Commissaire. Commissioner. If there's one welcome simplification, it's what we voted on yesterday, which is defense. It's something that we need to work rapidly on at the time when our alliances are weakened and there's a crisis in the world. And now we hear people saying, give no power to EU. These are people who are saying that they don't want NATO either. And they're going to leave us split up. Let's not talk about a single market in defense. Say those people who are not worried about fragmentation of our industry and large gaps in our defense. We see how difficult it is to get out of the routines that we've inherited from a time of calm which is no longer around. I'd like to thank the Commissioner, and I'd like to ring the old alarm bells facing what's happening in the US. Let us not step back from European preference and autonomy. Realism means that we have to understand that we can only count on ourselves. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, Commissioner, clearly it's a sad day.
when you have radical parties that were fueled by Russian money, has taken bribes from Russia, today quoting United States national security strategy. But that's the reality we have to accept and send a clear message that without military mobility, that without deterrence, we will be functioning as 27 separate systems, and we cannot accept it. 45 days for tanks to move from Paris to Bucharest is not acceptable. The worst, that this journey is prolonged by bureaucracy. On top of that, of course, we need a sufficient funding for our infrastructure. Because otherwise, military mobility should not be seen as sort of defense niche. It's what allows Europe's security to operate as one. And this is the fundament on which we can truly build our defense readiness by 2030. Otherwise, it's just a slogan, and we will be watching radicals smiling and showing us security strategies that we are not part of it.
Sorry, dear colleague, you have a blue card from Mr. Drossi from the ESN group. Do you accept it?
Yeah.
Mr. Drossi, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. Thank you for allowing the question.
One moment, okay. We can starting? Okay.
Thank you for accepting the question. Now, you mentioned a number of colleagues, not me, but a number of colleagues in particular suggesting that they'd got money from Russia. Do you have any evidence of that? And I mentioned the point. How much money do you get from Ukraine? Thank you.
Mr. Sinkevicius.
Thank you very much for your question. So there is enough that you can find publicly in the media which parties accepted bribes from Russia, which parties' campaigns were fueled by Russian money. There are plenty, and unfortunately it's not targeted just to one member state. If you want me to share you with this media news, I'll be free to do that.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Next speaker, Monsieur Botenga.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, why is it that every time you talk about defending Europe, you attack its workers? I read the text that you were proposing, and you say, oh, well, it's important that military equipment and tanks and so on moves more easily across Europe. And one of the elements that you mention is that the drivers will have to work longer, as if the defence of Europe were going to depend on the fact that, I don't know, perhaps you have weeks of work rather than 56 hours at a time, or perhaps lorry drivers not having a right to a break after 4.5 hours, a good break. Even that is being questioned. And why? Why is it that you are calling for a defensive war and then that becomes an offensive war against the workers? I can't explain it. And even the Transport Workers Union has said that the proposals that are talking about requisitioning workers would risk turning into forced labour. Do you see the ambiguities in the proposals that underlie your text? They can only put off European workers when it comes to these plans. Why are they going to support these plans when you're taking away their social rights? Thank you.
Monsieur, next speaker, Mr. David.
Chair, Russia represents a serious threat for the EU member states. If it is attacked or if it considers the situation to be threatening, I have not received a single intelligent answer to the question, what will be the motives of the Russian Federation for attacking EU member states? Russia has an immense territory full of resources, and by attacking the EU, it could only lose. claims about being in danger come from countries which are geographically distant from Russia, particularly from the UK, Germany and France. There were motives for Napoleon, Hitler and the British intervention. The EU member states are very much endangered, particularly by their own projects, by the Green Deal, by supporting immigration and by preparing for war with Russia. I would like to warn you, I come from a country which would become the battlefield and our men would be falling for foreign interests.
Vossenberg, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Commissioner, esteemed colleagues, we have built peace, but Russian infractions and Russian violation of European airspace and numerous different challenges from Turkey for Greece and Cyprus sends a clear message. Europe has to defend itself. Army mobility, military mobility is a foundation, it is a fundamental element of protecting the European Union and strengthening its ability to deflect and also to create that necessary military autonomy. The Transport Committee is welcoming this particular package and this increase in the budget for the next MFF. Let's not, however, have any cuts whatsoever. We need sufficient funding which will allow us for the necessary infrastructure, double use, and getting rid of any sort of impediments for transport, particularly transport of military vehicles and so forth within the European Union. Also, the role of ports is extremely important as far as military mobility and upgrading the possibilities in ports through additional funding. Defense and security in the European Union in our hands. It is right now. So we have to deal with this extremely historical challenge that we're dealing with right now. Thank you. President, esteemed colleagues, the report that we're discussing today focuses on two key points concerning the future of the European Union and defense, funding and military mobility. With regard to funding now, the necessary increase in the budget for military ought not lead to any cuts for the social state. Safety and security cannot be limited to military expenditures. We also need to have economic and social security as well, which protects social cohesion and reduces imbalances in society and inequality. There's no sense in having the most developed armies in the world but not having a system in place to deal with populism and with manipulation. Mobility. Mobility has to uncover the entire European Union, from the Baltic and the Black Sea to the Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean, and from there to the Atlantic. So the development of infrastructure for double use has to take place in a fashion that combines better and quicker links between the far-flung regions geographically in order to facilitate the movement for military purposes as well. Under no circumstances whatsoever is it acceptable for us to have the participation in this new military architecture, defense architecture, third countries, or any sort of links to third countries of companies, undertakings. And I'm speaking here about Turkey. We're speaking about a country which has shed its doubt and expressed its doubt clearly with regard to the territorial integrity of member states of our Union.
It's almost 4 years since the invasion of Ukraine, and we're now talking about the EU's preparedness to defend itself. This is first and foremost a NATO task, but okay. The economy of Russia is the size of Italy's economy. So if we in Europe are not in a position to defend ourselves against a conventional attack from Russia in a sufficiently deterring way so that Russia forgets about the attack, that is our politicians' fault. The truth is that most EU countries have done nothing to defend themselves. We've taken the dividends of peace, we've postponed necessary decisions, and we haven't done a whole lot to help Ukraine indeed, but a lot in words. That leaves that Europe is pretty much defenseless, and that is because ever since the wall fell and until today, we've decided that that is the way things should be. So if you really want to defend Europe, go back to your capitals and make sure that we start prioritizing conventional defense.
I announced that as we have lots of requests for Catch the Eye, we close the list now. So there is not going to be chance to be in that list from now on. Mr. Beriga, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. Dear colleagues, the ongoing war in Ukraine and the changed geopolitical situation have forced Europe to wake up from a long period of lethargy and prepare to take responsibility for its own security. From now on, every decision we make should be assessed in the terms of whether it makes us safer or more vulnerable. If we are serious about developing the defence industry, we must seriously reconsider excessive bureaucratic requirements. I'm glad that this is gradually beginning to happen. To achieve the necessary level of preparedness, appropriate investments are also required. Lithuania just approved a budget allocating 5.38% of GDP to defence. This is the necessary response of a country living next to an aggressor. However, similar responses are needed from other EU countries as well. It is not less important to invest in preparedness of society as a whole, and it's strengthening the will to defend. Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleague. Madam Boutsman, you have the floor.
Goedemiddag, collega's. Good afternoon. Donald Trump recently said the leaders of Europe are weak. They talk a lot, but they do little. And I have to admit, being honest, that hurt. The truth hurts. Nobody listens to Europe. We're not at any table because we're weak. Yes, we have 27 defense budgets, but we produce separately and we purchase separately and we plan separately. And that is not power. That is a bitty approach. So we have a choice. Either we keep talking and we buy American because we can do that quickly, or we finally get round to having a single European military power with a common production, common purchase, and in due course a European army. You know what my views are on that. And the person who's against that, I can say that the alternative is much worse, which is totally irrelevance of Europe. If we want Xi and Donald Trump and Putin to take choices, if we don't want them to make choices for us, then we've got to pull everything that's European, that's military, home to Europe. Otherwise, we end up being irrelevant from a military point of view.
Alistair.
Thank you, Mr. President, dear Commissioner, dear colleagues. The European Union thrives on the free movement of people, goods, services and capital. Yet a soldier in uniform cannot cross a border without official permission. When heavy equipment is being moved across borders, weeks of planning, permits and slots in crowded rail networks are needed. In future, our defence readiness, as previous speakers have pointed out, will be measured not in days or even weeks, but in hours of action. Dear Commissioner Tzitzikostas, in this context, I welcome the Commission's action plan on military mobility, and it is in this context that northern Germany plays a pivotal role, serving as a hub for troop deployments to and through Europe. Just think of ports like Wilhelmshaven, Bremerhaven, Emden or Rostock. A Europe that can deploy swiftly is a Europe that deters effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McAllister. La señora Serrano Sierra.
Ms. Serrano Sierra, please. Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. transport is a key part of the European defence strategy. Military mobility depends absolutely on the civilian transport network, both infrastructure and also the capacity of operators to act in emergency situations or crises. That is why these investments cannot be short-term. We need to have a strategic vision and we need a holistic focus, a 360 degrees approach which prepares the whole territory of the Union. What that means is strengthening civilian and military coordination, analysing maintenance and resilience of our infrastructure and also connections with the main points of entry and exit for troops, equipment and humanitarian aid. At the same time, we also need to evaluate the capacity of ports, airports and terminals. Finally, it is important that we should supplement our European corridors and invest in new cross-border projects so that we can unblock and find alternatives if there are attacks or operational problems with the main network. It is also important to ensure that we understand that to respond to all of these needs, we will need more than the 17 billion euros which has been set out. Thank you.
Ms.
Serrano, there is a blue card from Mr. Oliveira from the left. No? Okay, thank you.
My next speaker is Mr. Sturza.
Stimați colegi,
colleagues, Romania needs to be capable of defending its national territory whenever needed and regardless of the geopolitical context. And the European Union needs to decide whether it wants to be a relevant actor or if it wants to become a simple spectator to its own vulnerabilities. We have to take responsibility for the security of Europe by the contribution of each and every member state. The EU was built as a peace project, but peace does not mean weakness, but being ready for anything that might happen. Therefore, all member states need to accelerate their investment when it comes to security and defense, and together we should join forces so that we cooperate efficiently at the EU level. At the same time, we need to equip the Romanian army, but that should not lead to a diminished standard of life for the citizens. We need to invest in regional development and health care and agriculture as well, because we cannot ignore the needs of our citizens. A powerful union is a union that produces, feeds and protects its citizens. Lack of preparedness and lack of action for defending our countries is going to cost us a lot. Thank you.
Mr. Pike.
Dear colleagues, Europe and its defence capability needs us to let go of anything that weakens us, of any restrictions that weakens us. These are bureaucracy and budget restrictions. I think you remember that a few weeks ago Russian pilots entered the Estonian airspace and stayed there for 12 minutes. And the Finnish pilots could do nothing because of the restrictions. They couldn't come into the Estonian airspace. Such restrictions are outdated and we should review them in all EU member states and also in NATO states. Thinking about the military Schengen, I think we need to take very concrete steps, budgetary steps, because we need to have large investments in defence and security. And of course, here again, we need to let go of any restriction that hinders EU or NATO and makes it impossible to quickly move troops and equipment. Thank you.
Dear friend, Mr. Terras, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Dear colleagues, today's debate comes as very timely. We need to ramp up Europe's defence capability faster, and this is an existential task. Combat capability of our armed forces must be in the centre of our efforts. We must make sure we achieve a well-functioning funding of defence industry from banking and capital market sector. The next MFF must also reflect adequately the security situation and establish the stable long-term defence financing for the EU. The same goes for the European Competitiveness Fund. ESCF should include dedicated financing for defence. I also like to stress that the military mobility budget should be used for defence infrastructure projects only. There should be no space for creativity and gambling in that sense. Thank you.
Mr. Terras, you have a blue card from Mr. Gratsoulis from ECESN Group. Do you accept it? Okay. Thank you very much. Madam Annunziata.
Thank you, Commissioner, colleague. The dossier we are discussing now, it highlights some key element, I think. For the first time, Europe is speaking, but is speaking not of rearmament, start from defence. Defence, I want to remember here, is a constitutional citizen right through almost all the countries in Europe. It is a genuine step forward, and we hope it will help pave the way for a more unified debate on these issues. Second, the dossier affirms that a truly common defence will be effective only if it starts from creation of a European technological unit and the development of the European defence technological and industrial base. Third, the report criticised the excessive use of Article 122, which for us, as parliamentarians, is a key battle. If we do not assert, in fact, this principle, Parliament risks to stay excluded from the proceeding of this development. Parliament must always maintain, this is my opinion, its role of oversight and transparency of all the difficult choices that we are going to be called to make. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. Signor De Meo.
Grazie. Thank you very much, President. Our founding fathers showed us that integration moves forward concertedly. Now, we have something very clear before us. If we don't create a Europe that's able to protect the security and safety, strategically speaking, then we're headed for a very, very difficult situation indeed. We have to have a continent that's ready to assume the responsibilities set down by the Atlantic Alliance as well. We want to be a credible partner. We don't want to be dependent on anybody. We want to be able to react immediately, and we want to have a European defense industry which is strong, less fragmented, and which will be coordinated in its approach. We have to simplify procedures. We have to involve SMEs as well. We have to use cutting-edge technology as well. We have to invest in defense. And this is not something ideological. It is a political responsibility, because security and safety is absolutely fundamental for our credibility, for our welfare, and for our being able to move forward into the future.
Julis from ESN Group ask you for a blue card as well. Thank you very much. Mr. Mimarakis.
Thank you very much, President. I agreed and sign up indeed to what Mr. Commissioner Tzitzikostas has proposed, because this isn't a technical detail at all. It is a precondition in order for us to turn will to move forward, to deflect any sort of threat whatsoever. We have to have a system with infrastructure, with structure overall. Without that, Europe is vulnerable. So we have to work together. We have to have a common approach as far as funding as well, because our defense system, whether that is on land, at sea, or in space, protection of our eastern borders as well, all of this is absolutely key. Ports, railroads, tunnels, bridges. This is necessary not only for defense, but it's necessary for the economy of Europe as well. In other words, it reinforces other aspects of the economy as well. And indeed, we have to protect this like the apple of our eye. This is one of the goods that the European Union has to offer to its citizens. So our responsibility is to move from text to implementation with funding and with responsibility. A Europe that will be ready by 2030 will be a more secure, a safer Europe, a credible credible Europe and a Europe which will work for the welfare of citizens of the future. Thank you.
You are the third one having a request for blue card from Mr. Gratsoulis from ECN Group. Do you accept it? Okay. El señor Zoido tiene usted.
Mr. Thoido, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, President González Pons, Commissioner. The Trump strategy is the final blow for those who think that European defence wasn't urgent. As things stand, NATO continues to be the fundamental pillar of our collective security, at least in the short and medium term. But if we want that alliance to be solid, then we cannot let it turn into dependence. It must be based on a shared responsibility. And that responsibility must be borne by each of the partners, and it should include security and collective defence. To date, Europeans have not invested sufficiently, and we have been fragmented in our approach. And if that weren't enough, our industry is still not producing at the scale and speed that would be necessary for a prolonged conflict. If we want to change the pace, then we will need to have more political will, and we need to take on board costs now to avoid greater threats down the line. Autonomy in defence is not an ideological whim. It is quite simply a requirement for Europe's survival. Thank you.
Mr.
Thoido, you also have a request for a blue card from Mr. Gratsoulis from ESN. Okay, thank you.
Then we jump into the Catch the Eye time. My first speaker is Mr. Serba, seat 676.
Szanowny Panie Przewodniczący, President, it is very important, these two issues. We are talking about very high stakes. We're talking about Europe's security and Ukraine's independence. And we should all want to treat our defense readiness seriously. So we need to invest in our industry through SAFE, but as President von der Leyen said, maybe we should be talking about the second generation of SAFE. So right now, 8 prime ministers of the neighbors of Ukraine and Russia is taking place. So we need more funds to be ready. Individually and collectively.
Next speaker, Mr. Andriukaitis, seat 179.
Thank you, President, Honourable Commissioner. Indeed, the European Defence and Union has been discussed for a long time, and it's in the Lisbon Treaty since 2009. However, as it happens, nobody thinks anything until something happens. I see Mr. Ostravicius, Mr. Zile, and I'm also among those who know full well how investments into infrastructure are managed poorly. For example, investments into Rail Baltic project. It started back in 2004, and even today this project is looking not good at all. Investments now are very important, as important as never before, especially in the projects that are being implemented in countries bordering Russia. These projects should be prioritized, and I call upon the Commission that priority should be given to roads, railways, etc.
Colleague, my next speaker is Mr. Tinkinen, seat 210.
Mr. President, the clock is ticking for Europe. According to the European Defence Agency, EU defence spending reached 1.9% of GDP in 2024 and may finally exceed NATO's 2% target in 2025. You heard right, may exceed NATO's 2% target in 25. It's ridiculous that it has taken over 10 years to reach a target that is now outdated, while the new benchmark is 5%. Look at Finland or Poland after the war started in Ukraine. A sharp increase in defence spending. This proves that when there is a political will, it is possible. Europe needs sovereign states that are willing and able to invest in their own security. That is the path to real security. Europe cannot deter or defend anything in 2030 if we cannot already produce and deploy in 25. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tinkinen. My next speaker is Mr. Brandstetter, seat 189.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. I come from Austria, which is a neutral country. That's in the Constitution. But in 2010, we did change the Constitution, and it is clear that we are part of the common foreign and security policy. And in this European Union, that's very important because my Austrian homeland is also under threat, specifically from Russia. Just this week, an Austrian magazine described how an Austrian in Moscow was working for the secret services, and there were acts of sabotage and disinformation in Austria to turn people against Ukraine. And we know that there are other activities, also disinformation, directed against Austria. We know that within Austria there are people who perhaps are trying to achieve certain things in that line. So we need to stand together, and it should be clear that we want military Schengen. We don't want to have any kind of wordings being applied wrongly. We need to ensure that we defend our shared home together, and that is something we should be willing to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brandstetter. Mi siguiente orador es el señor Oliveira.
The next speaker is Mr. Oliveira.
10125.
Senhora Comissária Virkkunen, estes programas da mobilidade militar e da
Thank you very much. These particular programs of preparedness and mobility are poor choices, I feel, poor choices of the European Union. Here, we don't have the necessary railroad infrastructure for citizens, and we have a lack, or we have no proper systems of public transportation that are socially oriented. But the European Union at the same time is speaking about military mobility. We don't have ambulances. We don't have hospitals for our citizens. And the priorities of the European Union are better conditions for the circulation of citizens, ambulances, hospitals, but we're talking at the same time about war. We don't have the necessary port infrastructures or airport infrastructures, so the EU has other priorities, I feel. Commissioner, that which people need are solutions to their quotidian problems, economic and social. Let's not use war as some sort of political, or have that as a political target. Thank you.
Mr. Gratsulis, you have the floor. Seat 525.
Taip, gerbiami europarlamentarai, man labai gaila.
Dear parliamentarians, I'm really sorry that representatives of the ruling majority refused to reply to my questions. My first question is very important. In Lithuania, we are seeing the deployment of a German military brigade, but they do not have an authorization to do it. The authorization can be issued only by the German Bundestag. We are investing billions, but they do not have the right to defend us. Another thing which makes Lithuania look very strange. The bridge to the Kaliningrad region has been has been built from the money of the European Union. It's a very modern and nice bridge to Russia. The roads to Belarus have been renovated, repaired and whatever, but the project Rail Baltica is stuck since 2024. So what is happening? Very strange things. The European Union, only after 4 years of the war in Ukraine, is starting to consider how to improve the military mobility from one side of the European Union to another. Is it not too late? And when was the decision taken?
And my last Catch the Eye speaker is Madame Sacharia, seat 846.
Ακούσαμε για στρατιωτική κινητικότητα.
We heard about military mobility, bridges, tunnels, railroads, etc., so that they would be able to deal with heavy military loads. Simplifying a customs procedure in line with the demands of NATO. Hundreds of millions by 20-32% spent on the military. Many questions. What war are we preparing for? Do the people of Europe know about all of this? Greek mothers, French mothers, Italians, our European mothers, do they know that Europe is preparing for war and that it will be a Europe that is getting ready to send sons and daughters to the battlefield and that they may be receiving coffins in return? Is there any sort of democracy behind this particular strategy, or are we just forfeiting a Europe of peace towards a Europe of perpetual preparation for war without the consent of our populations? Why now? Has suddenly Europe forgotten about what's going on the southeastern borders of the European Union? The speaker has been cut off.
President Virkkunen, you have the floor.
Rapporteurs and shadows, thank you for all your work and also thank you for this very timely debate. It very clearly shows a very strong commitment to deliver on European defence readiness by 2030. A commitment for Europe to step up, to invest in defence and also to be ready to defend itself. It's also good to hear your support to the EU-wide military mobility area by 2027. To ensure a seamless movement of troops, equipment and military assets across the European Union. As we know, these are dual-use projects, so it means that these investments are also every day helping our citizens and also creating a better single market. And let me assure you that in Commission we are now in full implementation mode to deliver on these objectives. And also with our clear milestone and flagship projects, we are reinforcing Europe's ability to deter and defend across land, air, sea, cyber and space, while contributing directly to NATO capability targets. But we need your support. We look forward to working very closely with this House to adopt the proposed legislation as soon as possible. You also play a very important key role in delivering on the next MFF, where we have proposed a five-fold increase in defence spending and also 10 times more funding to military mobility projects. Honourable members, to be ready by 2030, we need to move now. We need to move fast and we need to move together.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. Now I'm going to give the floor to the three reporters. First one is Mr. Austrevicius.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, dear colleagues, I do thank you all who expressed their supportive views concerning military mobility report and more. And I do expect that this report to be voted tomorrow will receive a cross-party, cross-group support. We need unanimity, we need strong will and understanding what we do. And indeed, now it's time not only for reports, but for reports implementation, for concrete actions in place and continuous actions generally. So that's why I'm expecting legislative acts concerning military mobility to come as soon as possible and to be debated in an efficient way. Colleagues, let's not live in a denial that threats exist and they have a major impact on our lives. There is no need to remind, but I'll do it again and again. Security of the European Union is a very departure point, leading towards stability, economic development and achieving climate goals. No security, no stability, no achievements. And again, I would probably revert attempts to contradict investments into the military mobility against social economic infrastructure and projects we all need. It's wrong. It's populism and it doesn't lead to any better. Colleagues, Each centimetre of the European Union must be supported and granted with the great security means. To bring military capabilities, personnel and supplies is a very mean ensuring this goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Vice President Zile, you have the floor.
Thank you, President and Commissioner. Well, thank you, colleagues, for this very serious debate, and it's very good that there were so many colleagues were speaking here and were very serious on this military mobility issue, particularly. I just would like also to remind that if we will evaluate, and it was done by some military experts, what's going on currently with some sabotage or espionage against the infrastructure in the European Union, it's a preparedness for the destroy logistics of European Union and European military side to respond. So military corridors, military logistical points are absolutely important. That's why we don't not only to create new ones and to make more strong bridges and more strong railway lines, but we have to also to think about secure those lines, already existing ones. So that's a lot of tasks. And I would like also to say some issues which I think we cannot follow. For example, today started again to speak about who would be European commander instead of NATO. Clearly, clear hierarchy of military commandships. So I think we will just use not the right time in the preparedness of that, but just to make stronger our national forces is the most important issue, and not to debate, as we see sometimes on the aviation industry, military aviation, to do new European planes on a base of Aerofighter on Rafale or Leclerc or Leopard tanks and tank industry. We are for years not making decisions. Let's do variety of the military things, and it would be better and stronger. War is coming on the social network, social issues or against war issues, what already Peter Sostravicius said. So war is coming in a house very weakness. And if you will think that Ukrainian soldiers sitting for a month, several months in a front line, so didn't have other plans to create ambulances back home in Ukraine. So we are wrong on this issue, so we have to be strong. And about the children of France will not die for the others. I would like to remind the Second World War, when we don't have a NATO, we didn't have a EU, many Americans, many British soldiers and other country soldiers, they died for the freedom of France after Second World War. We have to be serious and responsible in our serious issues like war or peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague, Monsieur Romac.
Monsieur le Président, Madame la Commissaire, chers collègues.
President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, by way of conclusion, I'd like to express my thanks to everybody who spoke in this debate. The defense of Europe requires public and private financing. You've shown by enthusiasm that we're heading in the right direction, but also that it's necessary for us to work together and continue to work together. I'd like to thank the shadows for their work in the SEDE committee and for the fact that they were so constructive, so we ended up with a good result. I'd also like to thank Budge and Com committees for their contribution, which has shed additional light on the issue of access to financing for the defence companies. I'd also like to thank the SEDE committee. This is really something which is a concern for all of us without distinction of nationality or political affiliation. We have more and more enemies, and it's our task to make sure that we have our strategic autonomy. This goes through competitiveness and having an attractive model and a state of law, but also to make sure that Europe is a credible defensive power which would be feared by our enemies. We don't need a European army. That would be contrary to the treaties, but we do need a European staff which can manage the war. Thank you.
It's closed. The vote will be held tomorrow. But, dear colleagues, the sitting is suspended
It will resume in a few minutes with the Commission statement on the European Affordable Housing Plan. Sorry for the delay.